You're listening to the Nerd to Know Media Network. Join us at nerdtoknowmedia.com.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Doing It for the Exposure, the show that's a healthy dose of both fact and fiction. I'm your host, Mannequin Blue, and today's special guest is writer and comic creator Paul Carroll.
Hello, how are you doing?
Hi, I'm good. How are you doing?
Good. Surviving lockdown, which is a tiring experience in itself.
Oh, how many years has it been now?
One normal time, 10 lockdown time.
Oh, it feels like last March was about 6 years ago, but also last week.
Yeah, I don't like it.
I don't like it. That's all I have to say is just, I don't like it.
It feels like I should be more productive during all that time, but then it also feels like the time just disappears.
Well,
so nothing gets done.
I think that's the trap we've all fallen into at this point, is like, gosh, I should be more productive now.
Yeah, I mean, like, because I finished up in two separate jobs last year, one in January and then one in March because of the pandemic. And I thought, great, 24/7, I can do whatever I want. And do you think anything happened? it took a full 8 months to really get my butt in gear.
Well, no, in fairness now, you could do anything you wanted. It just turned out that the thing you really wanted to do was nothing.
Well, the thing to do was go to conventions or go outside and meet people. But I couldn't do those things.
Yeah, no, that's a fair point. But so you are a writer and a comic creator. So do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I guess the big question people might ask is why distinguish between the two? Because sometimes I'll try to do comics by myself, which is why I separate it. But also if I tell people I write comics or tell people I write prose fiction, they tend to forget about the other one. Whereas I feel like if I call myself a writer and a comic creator, at least then it says people might automatically assume that there's two separate things. And it means that I then get to annoy people by talking about my books and comics. So I write mostly science fiction, fantasy, but like within subgenres of them. So like there's a lot of paranormal stuff in my prose fiction, whereas my comics might lean more towards not necessarily like high fantasy, but I tend to be able to just mess around a bit with the fantastical a bit, and there'll be superhero stuff mixed in, which is superheroes are kind of a fantasy genre, even though some people think of them as science fiction, but most of what they do doesn't make any sense. And then I have Meowch, which is an action comedy, which is nothing like what I could write in prose, because a big part of the comics is how the artist then creates the visuals that I would otherwise need to describe. And it doesn't work as well in prose as it would in comics. So like Gareth really messes around with Meowch, put in a lot of visual gags, especially like the second issue. He's been sending me his pencils for it just like the past few days before we're recording this. And there's stuff popping up into it that I didn't put into the script, like when the cats in the comic, because there's a lot of cats in the comic, as the title might suggest, is jumping into screen with like a chicken leg with a bite taken out of it. That's not in the script. It's just because he's a chubby cat. He put it in.
So there's kind of artistic license taken with it a bit.
Yeah, especially with that and with the Wren, because they were partnerships set up from the get-go. Or in my case, I joined the Wren later on as the writer, but there's a lot less of this is how I want to present my work, and more we're working together to create this thing. Whereas with the likes of the sci-fi comics I do at Plexus, now I do give a lot of freedom to the artist, but there'll be, I think people take fewer chances on something when they're hired to do it as the artist. So like because myself and Gareth both set up Meowch as the entity, he will take some freedom to do whatever he wants with some of the art so long as the story's being told. But the likes of Rebecca Reynolds or Barry O'Sullivan or Donna Black, who worked with them all on stories for Plexus, they will do the things within their own style, and they'll stick to the script, and they tend not to deviate away from what I've asked the plot to follow. But like they still create their own sort of, they still create the story as people are going to read it, if that makes sense. Donna's art is all completely mental, which is why I hired her. Like it's mixed media stuff. And I had Barry draw a comic with almost no backgrounds because the character's jumping around this world that's falling apart. So there's a lot of chaotic scenes in the fact that I needed somebody who could draw action scenes to draw it, even though there's not a lot of action. It's one character trying to escape the end of the world. And it's the sort of thing that doesn't work in prose, but works beautifully in comics because you have this full page to create an illustrated story that words just can't do it justice. The words are there to guide the artist, and then that's it. They, aside from the dialogue, the audience doesn't need to see anything else. They just see what the artist actually creates out of the script. I love comics. Sorry.
No, that's actually fascinating because I'm just thinking you're probably one of the few people we've had on the show, probably apart from bands, that would regularly collaborate with other people. And I'm just kind of curious, how does that work? Like, do you set the scene obviously with the script and the writing and stuff, and then do you bring them in, or is there a level of kind of you get an idea and you approach someone first and you work it out together, or like just sorry, this is too many questions at once.
No, it's fine. So for me, I will tend to send like a 1-page pitch to an artist that I'm interested in working in before I write a script. So they have like a rough breakdown of the pages, literally like a 1-line thing, just so they can see that I have pacing in mind for the story and like a full outline of the story, what sort of tone I'm looking for. So they can decide before anything's written if it's for them or if they want any sort of input in how the story is going to be told from the script point of view. They can say it before I write anything. So I pitched something to Leanne Hamilton, and she just had a couple of suggestions. Just she wanted the thing to be much more adventurous than I was making it. Like she really wanted to push the boat on the comic. So it was something I was able to take into account before I wrote the script. Not everyone would make those sorts of requests. Other times it's just, how mad can I go on this? Like Donna really wanted to let loose on it, and Donna got to create some monsters for the comic, which even though it's a sci-fi comic, it was dealing with illusion and false reality. So she got to really mess around with how things were looking in the comic, and mostly her questions were centered around how mental can I go with this as long as I stick with the story. Like she changed some of the visuals I'd asked for, but I went with her for a reason. I know it's because of the visuals that she can create. So it's, as a writer, when you're looking to collaborate with an artist, you're looking for someone who, not just like their art, what it looks like at the end, but also if you're familiar with their process, that's the sort of person you look for as well. I knew Donna would do her own thing, and I wanted her to. And that's why I approached her. Whereas with prose, you're stuck with yourself in your own head. So there's there's not a lot of collaboration there. But it's a nice mental shift to have the two, because sometimes you want full control, and other times you want someone else to help tell the story in a better way.
Yeah, I get that completely. Like sometimes just you have an idea or a project and you're like, this is my baby, I have to do it myself, somebody else is going to mess it up. And then other times you're just like, that person like is perfect for this thing that I want to do.
Yeah, and that's it. And it's not even like with the prose, is not even afraid of someone messing it up. It's more afraid that somebody might interpret something different and it'll change the way the story is told to a way that you don't want it to be told. So it might still be a good story at the end, but it's not the story you wanted to tell. And I guess that's where some writers can get very finicky when they're collaborating with people on comics, because they really need to spell it out in some cases. Like there are very few writers that I know in the small press scene who are so specific they will give out if an artist does something different. But if there's something that they definitely want to keep and something that has to be there, they'll say it. Like it doesn't happen often, because honestly most writers in small press are just grateful to have someone say to working on a script with them. But when it does happen, it's definitely a case of like you set down the very small boundary of the one thing that has to happen, and then you let someone make or break it, and you kind of just accept that you the decision you made to contact them in the first place is either going to be the right one or the wrong one. I've never been disappointed, thankfully, but
Oh yeah, no, I'd say communicate. Like I always say that communication is key, but especially with when you're trusting somebody with something so important to you.
I mean, every artist has their own different style of how they collaborate as well. Like for some, it is just one or two emails back and forth. First time I collaborated with Claire Foley, we literally went for a coffee and we sat down and we talked through the script for about an hour, and it was only 4 pages, but it was so she could get it into her head what I wanted to do with the story, and like how I visualize characters, how I visualize the colors and things like that, because Claire works in watercolor. So she was very focused on the visuals and what sort of impact I was trying to make with the comic. But with Garrett, sometimes I can have a 10-minute conversation with me out, and then he'll turn around and you'll have a page layout that isn't necessarily what I would have imagined, but it's because he's playing with it. And I guess that's the fun part of making comics. You get to see artists play with the work. For them, it's not it's not like they can just take out a camera and they're not shooting something that's there. It's not like some people make the filmmaking comics connection because they both follow kind of a storyboard thing, but the artist is literally in control of everything. There's no people there for them to manipulate. They have to put the people there. They have to control everything that happens. And assuming the script isn't an Alan Moore script where it's a full page for a single panel, they got very little to go on about what should happen. It's my favorite part of working in comics, just seeing something develop from the script. Because like especially Meowth was the first big project that I had for that. So the first issue was 20 pages. So I'd sent Gareth a 20-page script, and then by the end of it we had 20 black and white pages, which were then colored by Joe and then lettered by Haas. And it was just this layering of different people's contributions to the story. And even though people don't see letters as having a huge part in the comic because they don't understand the role of it, which is fair from an outside point of view. People don't understand the role of letters that well, but there were jokes in the comic that didn't exist until Haas put them in. Like there's a caption for a location in one of the pages, and Gareth had drawn the moon in the background. Joe colored it nice and bright. So Hassan put the shadow of the caption onto the floor in the room. We didn't ask him to, he just did it. It was like, because there's a lot of fourth wall breaking stuff in the comics, and he's like, yeah, I want to do this thing. This is going to be fun.
It kind of sounds a bit, just from my perspective, it kind of sounds a bit like you're a director almost.
Director and audience at the same time. Because it's like you direct the start of it, and then you turn your back and let people do their job, and then when you turn back around, it's done. And unless there's changes that need to be made, which is very rare, like if you've chosen the teammates, your collaborators from the start, like it's rare that you need to actually request changes because you've picked them for a reason. But yeah, it's fun. Like you turn around as a writer and suddenly this black and white script that you had that's turned into this beautiful work of art, and you feel guilty taking any credit for it.
I put my idea on a piece of paper and then it just happened.
Yeah, but so like especially with Meowth, because it was a partnership between myself and Gareth from the very beginning. Like I do a lot of the marketing and the just managing the sales of it between events, because Gareth will do the big conventions, but I do a lot of the small ones as well in between. And that's just my way of trying to pull my weight after he's done the heavy lifting. So it's like the writer in a collaboration on a book, especially where it's a case of like myself and Garrett split revenue on the book. It's not a case of I pay him for it, because he approached me with the idea to begin with rather than the other way around. We're a weird team. So I do a lot of like the admin and like booking of conventions and bringing the book to smaller conventions that he doesn't want to do, so that we can get the book out there, so that he gets the benefit of the sales without having to do all of that work as well. And at conventions, he can do commissions while I'm pitching the book to people. And to be fair, having a cutout of a cat holding two knives standing over the book has worked wonders for getting people to just stop and ask questions about it, because they want to know what this murder cat is that's just standing over a table.
I think anyone would definitely be fascinated by a murder cat.
There's two knives in his cheeky little face. Why does a cat need knives? No one knows. He's already got four of them in each hand.
But so you've kind of founded your own, is it a publishing company, or what would you call it? Limit Break Comics?
Yeah, so we call it a comic collective
Mhm.
because until the most recent projects that we're doing, we have never taken submissions. And it's not a case of we'll ever take submissions of books because we're not a company. We were just three individuals who needed to work together, especially because Gary is another writer in the group. So it's myself, Gareth Luby, and Gary Maloney. And Gary's another writer. So for him to try manage all of his own sales and conventions and everything by himself would be practically impossible because of the costs involved, especially because he was only just starting out. So we decided early on that we would form the collective for the three of us to publish everything under that we do together. So we have our own little brand and everything, but we manage everything separately. So like Gary completely funds his own books, like completely fund my own books, but we publish them under Limit Break so that we can push everything together at the same time. So it becomes unified as everything reaches the public, if that makes sense.
Yeah, exactly. No, we did the same thing with Nerd to Know Media. You know, I push my own show and everyone else pushes all their own shows and that kind of thing, but we kind of house them together.
Yeah. So you get it. So it's a similar sort of model, and I guess because we generally operate under like where we have our own separate identities as writers and artists, but like we end up basically pushing smaller books as well. Then, so it's nearly like another branch out from that. Then, like there's Limit Break and there's Paul and then there's Plexus as a third step out, and it's just it becomes a case of then each person tries to push everyone's books at a single convention, and sometimes you don't even have to. Someone will just come up and say, "Okay, I'll get them all," which is it's part of the reason why we did it because I knew about the collective purchasing decisions that people can make, and I wanted that sort of benefit to pass along to well, not just onto my own books, but I wanted to be able to pass it on to Gary's books as well because I know how conventions can be because I used to run a market, so I knew what I knew the minimum price he would have been paying for a table anywhere, and for him to make any sort of sales on his book, it benefited him and me to have everything on under the one label and on the same table. And now I have this next big project, which is it's the scary one because it's the open submissions. So that's Turning Roads, which kickstarting now, and we've over 30 creators in it, which is insane. People were slagging me in a Zoom call. There's like a tiny little Zoom call between some comic people, and they're like, you know, trying to control artists is like herding cats, and I used to herd 30 of them. So I mean, it's going well at the even at the point of recording where I'm just about to launch the Kickstarter because quarantine time is weird and recording times for podcasts is weirder. Like even at this point, it's going well. We're like just getting responses from the different creators, and it like there's a nice little that we don't talk as a big group because I don't want the GDPR can't share 30 emails on everyone, but like there's a nice kind of familial response for it because I'd COVID whenever I was responding to people's submissions, and I got a lot of well wishes back whenever I was telling people that they'd gotten into the anthology, and I was very formal with that as well. Like it was like here are your dates, here's all the info you need, all these different things. After the little disclaimer that I've COVID, so this might be really wordy or really formal. I don't even know because I was writing the email through a little brain fog in between naps. But it's a really nice team, and it's the biggest team I've had to manage in comics. Well, in anything. But there's a huge mix of people, which is great. I got people from all over the world. I was going through the creator bios today for the social media, so they'll have been popping up for a couple of weeks now by the time this goes live. And it was just nice to actually see the locations of some of the people because some of them they don't have it easily available on their social media. But like there's a Canadian comic creator in the group, And I didn't pick her because she was international. I wanted some international because I wanted to expand the reach of the comic outside of Ireland.
Mm-hmm.
But it was nice to have like Canadian and American and UK creators. And I think there's someone based in Australia, but I can't remember off the top of my head. It might have been pitched from Australia. I have brain fuzz because it's late at night. But there were pitches coming from everywhere. And it was such a cool response because it was our first ever open submissions we've done for a project. So like there's nothing that for people to say, okay, they know exactly what they're doing, because every book we've done before this has been 20 odd pages, whereas this is going to be an 80-page perfect bound book, which is insane. Like we've 18 4-page comics in it, and then tiny bit of back matter, and this is just a time of recording, so I don't even know if at some point, if the Kickstarter goes well, I'll have to add more onto the end of that. We'll see if that prediction comes true. But yeah, it's an exciting project. It's retelling of Irish folklore and legends. It seemed like some of the Irish creators came out of retirement for it. Like people haven't seen a lot of new comics from Hugo Boylan or from Dave Hendrick in a while. And when both of them pitched, I was like, oh yes, like because they're two of the big writers in Irish Small comics. And they were two people whose books I always loved to read. And then they both turned to focusing on pitching series to publishers. So their budget disappears for the smaller stuff. So I get these new comics from creators that I admire, which is it's a really exciting thing to have happened. And I get to work with Trina Farrell, who does work with Marvel, like a lot of work with Marvel. She's a colorist. So that was a big deal for me because I've known Trina since 2015. Which is when I started not taking an interest in the Irish comic scene, but actually being able to get involved because I was no longer working weekends and I was doing a documentary about comics. So I interviewed Trina, and this was before she'd gotten her professional work, before she made her big break. So now it's like 6 years later-ish. It would be 6 years by the time people get the book in their hands from when I first met Trina. And it's mental to see like her career progression and then to get to work with her in such a short period of time after she's made her break at Marvel. I love Trina's colors. Like I cannot understate that. I turn into a bit of a fanboy when I'm looking through the comics that people are sending me. So it's a fun experience as an editor. So sending rejections was not fun.
No. No, but it sounds amazing, and actually I'm looking forward to it myself. And just to peel the curtain back a little bit, because obviously we do pre-record the show, but now that we're doing it bi-monthly, we are actually recording a week before the show itself goes out. So just for anyone listening who is interested in the Kickstarter and wants to help fund you or get involved somehow, how long is that running for?
It'll be running for a month, so it's assuming everything goes correctly on Kickstarter, it'll be launching on the 24th of February, and then if I worked it out correctly, it goes on until about the 25th of March, so a week after Paddy's Day.
Brilliant. Yeah, no, we'll definitely share that around as well, because by the time this show goes out, it'll already be launched, so we might as well jump in on it, you know?
Yeah.
But that's super exciting, and I really genuinely hope it goes well for you, because it's definitely something that I would be interested in myself. And
there are a lot of cool ideas that were pitched to me. Like I know I'm the editor, so I'm slightly biased for it, but like slightly biased. Like I was getting excited about a lot of these ideas being pitched, and that was the big difference between who I accepted and who I had to say no to. Because if people were pitching the same creature from mythology or the same story, I generally had to go towards the pitch that excited me most, especially if the portfolios were fairly balanced. So like this is a collection of stories that excites me. Like I really want people to see these stories when they're done, which is why I really wanted to get funded, because otherwise the book just doesn't exist. Like this Kickstarter is to pay people. People need to be paid for making their comics.
Yes.
not just for this, for everything. People always need to be paid for making their comics. And, if I get to be part of that culture where I, tell people to pay their artists, pay their creative teams, then yes, all more for it.
Yeah. Nobody wants to just be doing it for the exposure.
Yeah. Name drop. Roll credits.
Yeah. But speaking of paying people, because you actually run your own shop as well. Apart from the books and the comics, you do own a small greeting card company.
Yeah, Red Fox Cards, which I puzzled over the name for a solid 2 or 3 days. And then I looked up and I saw a fox somewhere in my room because I've got loads of fox things. And I was like, wow, I'm an idiot. Like, there's literally this thing that I love right in front of me. Why don't I just name it after that? And then it just felt natural after that. But yeah, Red Fox Cards. Yeah, so it started off just greeting cards. And then I was like, you know what? I've got these sticker designs already done. And a lot of card designs work for bookmarks. So I just expanded into that and added pins. Well, a pin now, but there will be more because I love pins. I love enamel pins. I have an insanely large collection of enamel pins compared to this time last year. And little writing guides. I moved some of my writing products into Red Fox just so they were in a marketplace that was actually moving. And I've gotten some really nice reviews for like even just the smallest of stickers. People are just excited to get them because they're like, especially there's like writing genre ones. So it's a way for writers to say, you know, they can advertise to other people that this is what they write without having to be loud and annoying about it. Because writers do not like talking to people. We don't know how.
Sorry, you're just like freaking out right now that you have to do a half an hour's worth of talking.
Oh, I'm just thinking about the hot chocolate I'm rewarding myself with at the end. Writers bribe ourselves a lot. It's how we get things done. we're like dogs.
Oh, that's brilliant. But no, seriously, like for anyone listening at home, if you want to support a small business, I definitely recommend Red Fox Cards. Like I do occasionally purchase stuff there myself, and I just love even the goth cards. They're my favorite. Like I'm biased. I'm totally biased.
I love doing the goth cards. The goth Valentine's card was one of my favorite things to do. I'd had the idea for about 8 months before Valentine's Day. Like it was one of the first things I thought of after I released the first batch of cards, and I was like, why is it so far away from Valentine's Day? I want to do this card now. The goth ones, they're a lot of fun to do because like they do have the sort of grim thing, but they're also funny.
Yeah.
Like there's definitely humor in them that people who are into that will go, okay, I see the joke. It's not just this weird dark card.
I know, I genuinely love them. Like I gave one to my brother for his last birthday. I gave him, I think it was the one with the hourglass on it. And he was just like,
yes.
Are you trying to make me think about death?
Yes, that's why I gave you the hourglass with wings. That's what it's about.
Oh no, they're genuinely lovely. Honestly, I love them. I'm gonna have to get loads more.
Thank you.
Yeah, no, they're brilliant. But just moving on a little bit, so you also do a supernatural series of books.
Yes, the Black Pages, which also didn't have a series title for about 2 or 3 years, and then it clicked in my head because I've already been using it in stories. So the Black Pages is, in world, it is a phone book. It's basically the supernatural version of the Yellow Pages, and it's where one of the characters has his services as a detective listed. That's where another one has his services as a necromancer listed, even though necromancy is slightly frowned upon. But the editors haven't figured out how to remove his ads. The pair of them have broken the rules and gotten their stuff in, and they can't figure out how to make the ads go away. Which, you know, I love introducing little bits of chaos into the stories like that. So I currently have 2 sidelong arcs going. One is the magician and one is the reaper. So the magician is the detective. He's a magical detective. He's London based, but tends to have to travel quite a bit. So the first book he's in brings him to Dublin halfway through the book because there's a monster in the Liffey. Yay! It's not just the rubbish. Yeah, there's an actual monster.
Trolley monster.
Yeah, the trolley monster. And the second book for him, which it was due out in November and then didn't come out because lockdown time was pushed that back a few months. But he goes to America, to the hidden 51st state called Despair, which you can only access through the small town of Misery, Missouri. I love puns. I love puns so much. And then the second arc in the books, so they run concurrently. I started with A Death in the Family, which is the Reaper, and then the preferred reading order is to go Reaper Magician, because I tease out more details that apply to both of them as each book goes on. So the Reaper follows a millennial who gets a job as a Reaper to pay off his parents' supernatural mortgage. When I'd sent it to a friend who is like an insanely fast reader, he was sending back, he sent back all of his notes in one go, but his notes were taken as he was reading the book. So there's a lot of commentary, like calling Ben an idiot, which he is a bit because he doesn't really pay attention all the time when he's supposed to. And at one point, Ian, who was the reader, he was like, "Is this a rom-com? This feels like a rom-com," because Ben falls in love with somebody and he doesn't know why. He's met her once and he falls in love with her. There's whole magical reasons for it, and it's actually explained in the book. It's not just there's a thing. Oh, what's his name? Timothy Hickson. He has a thing for soft magic systems where the explanation is a wizard did it. So like, there's actual reasons for a lot of stuff that happens in the books. I use The Death in the Family as like a commentary on corporate life in America, because it's Ben's first like quote unquote office job, even if his office is the afterlife, and his clients are dead people. But it's a lot to do with like procedure and doing things correctly, but also like what happens when you fall in love, and how do you deal with the idea of there being no life after death, and the concept of what there is after death. So like it became a weirdly philosophical project as I was writing it, but it's one of my favorite things to write. I really punished Ben a lot. Like I gave him an anxiety disorder in the second book because of what happened in the first book. Like I really punish him, but I love writing. He's really innocent and naive character who has this big responsibility that he wasn't really prepared to take on. But that or his dad died. So it was, there were two ways to pay the mortgage: take on the job or your dad is dead. So we took on the job.
Oh my gosh.
Look, his parents made the deal in the first place. It was their mortgage. He's just paying it. And I purposely gave them some stakes, and the mortgage wasn't just to buy a house. It's not like a financial mortgage. It was magical. And I can't remember what point in the series I explained what it was. So I can't remember if it was the first or second book. So I'm not going to say it here because I don't want to spoil the little. Because I thought it was a nice detail. It was like one of the humanizing things, and like Ben's whole thing is that everything he does is for his family. It was to keep his family as their whole unit of 4 plus a dog. So like he's making this big sacrifice so that his family is still there. So as I'm writing it, I constantly have to remind myself to bring his thought patterns back to the household and the family. And I got to have his family be concerned about him if he's gone for a few days because his job was just insane. But because he has this magical sight with him, he doesn't necessarily feel the exhaustion all the time. He has something keeping him going that kind of just forces him into the job. And it makes it so that he loses track of who he is, and his family ground him a lot. So like, it's a supernatural series, but it's about the people, especially the Reaper books. They're just they were the thing that clicked in my head whenever I was struggling to write a few years ago, and the whole story just unfolded. And I think I wrote the first draft in about 10 days. Just like once I started, I couldn't stop.
Yeah, no, that's great. It's honestly, like, it's always brilliant when you get a brainwave for something and then you get excited about it, and then you're like, oh, I have to write all of this down now before I forget it.
And would you believe all of that was unscripted? So I just said, like, I haven't gotten to talk about these books in a year and a half because I always pitched them at conventions, and yeah, that was just exciting to get to do that.
Yeah.
I need more people to ask me about my books. Well, to make me want to write again.
Speaking of people asking about your books, if people want to keep up to date with you, or maybe buy your books, or just see what you're up to, where's the best place to do that?
So I have a website. It's paulcarrollwriter.com, and the homepage has a sign-up form for a newsletter. I send it out every week. It's fairly short, and you get free short stories and stuff like that, including some samples from a collection I released last year in the hopes that I might have a convention to bring it to, called Tales of the Fantastical. And I added time travel story into the bundle as well. So no matter what form you sign up on, you get free short stories, and I'm always going to be adding to it.
Yeah, brilliant. And we're going to share all your links as well. We'll definitely make sure to do that. And if people want to join your Kickstarter as well, we'll share that too. Just before we finish up, is there anything that you would love to talk about that we haven't talked about yet?
Oh, no, I just miss conventions. That's the only thing I can say. we were talking about this before we started recording, and it's been 18 months since we've had a big convention in Ireland.
Yeah, I think the last convention I was at was last February. So it was like literally the last one before lockdown, and that was Shuricon.
Oh wow. Yeah, I had Decaf's Christmas market in the December before lockdown, and Octocon and Decaf in the October, but they were all quite small events. Like Dublin Comic Con and Worldcon were the 2 events before that. Like I had 2 weeks of conventions, and then 18 months later still don't have a big one. It was 2 solid weeks of being in the convention center. Like I think out of 10 days I was there for 7.
Oh wow.
Which is, yeah, like it was full on. And now I have nothing. My home away from home is closed.
Now we have all this pent up energy and
and all I can do is buy pins with it. When this comes out, I'll probably have put up my pin collection on my Twitter so people can see what I'm talking about. Like,
and everyone should.
It has been a crazy year for my collection.
Everyone should buy, books and comics from Paul so that he can feed his crazy pin habit.
I feel slightly judgy, but I set myself up for it. I'm looking at the banners now going, oh my god, there are so many.
It's good though, it's good to have a hobby and a collection that's good for you.
It's good for the soul at least.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. No, there's no judgment here.
Oh, I'm judging myself. Writers are very good at that.
Well, there's no judgment from us anyway. Yeah, so anyone listening at home, definitely check out Paul and his works and his collectives, Limit Break Comics, and also we didn't mention Cup on Fae as well.
Yes, which is my writing group. We publish anthologies of short stories, and we took a year off. We're taking 2021 off because we almost killed ourselves in 2020 trying to do 2 of them in lockdown. And I think we're a weird group of writers where we need the human interaction, like the face-to-face interaction.
Yeah.
But only with each other. So if we can get it back with each other, then we can start doing our anthologies again, and we won't go insane from it.
Yeah, definitely check them out, show them support, tell them we sent you. But listen, Paul, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on the show, and thank you so much for taking the time out.
Thanks, Katie.
If you enjoyed this episode of Doing It for the Exposure and would like to hear more in the future, make sure to follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at DIFTE Podcast. You can also check out our stream on nerdtoknowmedia.com. We stream bi-weekly on Spotify, SoundCloud, and YouTube. Thank you so much for listening.
Thank you for listening to a Nerd to Know Media production.